students. Today we are going to look at the federal bureaucracy as discussed in Chapter 14. So first of all, when we say bureaucracy, the definition that is commonly most accepted describes the large, complex organization of appointed officials, non-elected officials, and agents that represent the bureaucratic department and agencies in our federal government. When most people think of the executive branch, they imagine the president, and then also now we should remember that the cabinet is part of the executive branch. Another sort of branch in the tree of the executive branch is the federal bureaucracy, which again are all the different departments and agencies that report directly to the president, or the president has direct oversight of. One quick note is that these agencies and departments, the people typically operate on merit principle, and we're going to look at how that has evolved over time. And there are some important key features to keep in mind when looking at the federal bureaucracy. First of all, these are departments and agencies employed by people who are considered experts in a specialized task or job. So for example, the Food and Drug Administration, the people who work for that agency are going to be experts in the field of food standards, safety, drug standards, etc. There is also a hierarchical way or structure about the bureaucracy, meaning that authority is dictated from the top down and then responsibility flows from the bottom up. And then, as I noted up here, it is supposed to operate under the merit system, meaning that people must qualify and prove competency in order to be a part of the bureaucracy. So that's a little confusing. So I found some graphics that I thought might be helpful to kind of picture what it looks like when I keep using the word bureaucracy. So for example, the Constitution outlines the three branches of government. We know that. And what's kind of interesting is in the executive office of the president, there are other agencies and councils that report directly to him. But then if we look below, the cabinet is sort of, again, going with our hierarchy below that, and we know that there's all of these different cabinet positions. And then there's another huge group of government corporations and independent agencies that, again, are going to report directly to the executive branch, or the top of the executive branch, the president. So for example, the Farm Credit Administration, I wish that I could tell you specifically what their work looks like on a day-to-day basis, but anything dealing with that is going to happen in this administration, and the power and the responsibility flows upward, and ultimately the president has final oversight over that administration. Same thing with the Social Security Administration. So all those people who are responsible for handing out Social Security checks, they all are part of this group, and they work for the executive branch, and again, the president is who they would report to. Excuse me. Okay, here's just another visual that I think does a nice job of showing exactly how massive the federal bureaucracy is. So we've looked at the executive office of the president, but then we have all of the cabinet positions, and then we have all the different independent agencies and government corporations, and there's so many. The federal bureaucracy literally employs millions of people. If you see here, I mentioned the Social Security Administration. Over here in this corner, we have the Federal Election Commission, the FDIC, we have the Federal Trade Commission, we have the Federal Communications Commission, all of that. So anyone who works in those different agencies or corporations, they are part of the federal bureaucracy, which is an extension of the executive branch. So just to kind of break it down by numbers, in terms of executive departments that are a part of the federal bureaucracy, you can see that, again, if we add up all these total number of people who are currently employed by the federal government, it's going to be in the millions. Anyone who works for the Department of Transportation, they are just one of over 57,000 people who are employed in that particular agency. And then just to give you a breakdown of what it looks like by department, so this is the Department of Defense. and the Secretary of Defense is one of the cabinet members. But then you can see that there's so many more people who work and report directly to the Secretary of Defense, who again is going to report directly to the President. So we sort of just have this really long chain of command and responsibility and authority. We have the Department of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Secretary of Defense, Inspector General, and Joint Chiefs of Staff. And then under each one of those branches, there's agencies and personnel who report to them, and then it just keeps going. So you can see that there actually is a Pentagon Force Protection Agency, who is one of the defense agencies that reports to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, who then would report up to the Secretary of Defense. So millions and millions and millions of people are a part of all of these different departments and agencies that in reality affect our daily lives, but are not as visible as the president and most of the cabinet members. When we look at other non-cabinet agencies, you can see that the U.S. Postal Service employs almost 600,000 people. And that is obviously, getting mail is something that affects our daily lives. Social Security, that affects a lot of people's lives. So all of these agencies provide services to our society and employ millions and millions of people, creating lots of jobs. So how do people get these jobs? Originally, people who worked in the federal bureaucracy were hired based on patronage, and patronage was the system of hiring and promoting simply based on political factors. And so it was really a who do you know kind of game. And this is because former presidents would sort of just pick their cronies and their boys and people who they knew were loyal supporters and put them in really powerful positions, because the advisors on all of these councils are the ones who implement policy, and it's going to be the policy that affects the hundreds of millions of people living in the United States. However, Chester Arthur, during his presidency, probably most notably, was his ability to get Congress to pass the Pendleton Civil Service Act in 1883. And this changed the system of patronage into one of civil service. And civil service was hiring not based on political factors, but rather on skill and competence. And as part of this, most people who would like to get a job in the federal bureaucracy need to pass a written exam. And the written exam applies, or is, I guess, in the field of a certain skill set. And once they have passed the test, their name is added to a pool of other candidates who have also passed that same test. And then when the Office of Personnel Management needs to replace positions, they are sent 3 names, or given 3 names, of people from that pool who have passed the test, and they pick one of those 3 qualified candidates. So the Pendleton Civil Service Act, combined with the Hatch Act, which we'll talk about in a second, eliminated just picking people based on personal preference and made it a system more on merit or competence. So the Hatch Act also was significant because it currently prohibits civil service employees, so anyone in the bureaucracy, from, excuse my typo, actively participating in partisan politics while on duty. So because members of the bureaucracy are the ones who implement policy and have such a big, profound effect on Americans, interest groups and congressional committees take a really keen interest in what the agencies are working on, and they try to influence them based on what the people that they are representing want. And so we started to see some really shady maneuvering and manipulation occur in order to get certain policies passed. And so this act, which was first ratified in 1939 and then amended in 1993, prohibits federal bureaucrats from participating in politics. So what that means is if someone has a job in the federal civil service field, they are not allowed to be involved in party politics. And that's really just to kind of clean it up. Okay, I had mentioned the Office of Personnel Management. This is the group in charge of hiring for most federal agencies. The advisor of this organization is appointed by the president with Senate approval. And so this is a really powerful position because he or she reports directly to the president and gets to essentially decide